Good day, Dan Lyman, editor-in-chief at borderhawk.news. I'm joined today by Daniel Poynter. Daniel is one of the co-founders of Save Heritage Indiana, a new grassroots organization focused on Indiana issues and America First issues, especially immigration, because as we know, all issues essentially that affect our nation and affect the state of Indiana are downstream from immigration. Daniel and his organization just hosted the great Commander Gregory Bovino for a huge mass deportation rally up in Indiana that got a lot of press, so we're going to be talking about that today. But first, I want to let Daniel introduce himself, his organization, and everything else that he does. How you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
Thank God. Better every day. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Excellent. Tell us more about Save Heritage Indiana and more about the projects that you're working on.
So Save Heritage Indiana, nonprofit, we are the first organization in Indiana to give a voice to the citizens who want less immigration, which is crazy. There's 6 million people here. We're very red, so to speak, but there was no organization organized to advocate for less immigration until we came on the scene. We're 100% volunteer. My day job is commandleaders.com. I create software for right-wing America First organizers. It's like Duolingo, but for activism, where you get a task every day to keep marching forward. I got a wife and 3 kids. We're going to homeschool, and I'm really, really into genealogy and family history.
Beautiful, beautiful. Big fan of homeschooling. I was homeschooled myself for many years, so that's great. Great to hear. So let's get into the meat here. You had the big rally recently, and the big name, of course, was the recently retired, forced into retirement, Commander of Border Patrol, who led in 2025 the operation at large for the Trump administration, which, for all intents and purposes, was the kickoff of the mass deportation agenda until, as many would say, the administration got some cold feet about that, especially after a couple of unfortunate incidents in Minneapolis, and Bovino was essentially sent out to pasture, and the administration just started taking a different approach on everything, and there's a lot of debate as to whether or not mass deportations are happening at all, or if they ever will. But I think you brought a lot to the conversation with this rally and having the commander in town to speak at it. So tell us how things unfolded. There's a lot of interesting details about how this played out. There were counter protests and things like that, or I should say protests, not counter protests. So just give us the background on the event itself. What got you started on that? Because as far as I know, it's the first kind of high-profile mass deportation rally to be held in the U.S. So to fill us in.
Yeah, the first, and it was in Indiana. I want to shout out, thanks for all the work you do with Borderhawk. Thanks also to Alex Jones Network. I recently joined the John Birch Society, and someone said that Alex Jones said they are the OG. And the John Birch Society started in Indiana. So Indiana has a lot of contributions to the nation. I wanted this to be our contribution. This first mass deportation rally, we're only 3% of the nation, but we have a lot of potential in Indiana. It's not organized, but we're organizing it. So I always throw ideas out to my group chats, and I just listen to see what's exciting. When I mentioned hosting Commander Bovino, people got really jazzed. When I mentioned it on Twitter, it just blew up. So I just added him, and I was like, hey, man, can we host you? And he goes, yeah, sure. And boom, we're off to the races. It probably took me 2 months, 60 hours a week to put this together. It was a cat and mouse game with the left. There was about 10 funded organizations on the left that came together to protest. And on our side, it was just us, totally volunteer. The other big conservative organizations were really nowhere to be found, including many of our elected officials, which I came to learn. Some of them supported us, our Attorney General, Rokita, our Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, but other people were noticeably absent. They didn't want to record any endorsements or encouragement. But we got Rupert Lowe, we got Martin Sellner. So it was the first in the nation, and it was very exciting. I can take it. There's a lot of things to say.
Oh, great. And of course, Martin and his organization threw an incredible remigration summit in Europe, in Porto, Portugal. I believe it was last month or the month before. And Commander Bovino really came out of his shell to go speak at that one. It's like his first big major event. And I think people realize, hey, this guy is really serious about this. He had a lot of hardcore stuff to say in Europe. And the European patriots were very inspired by his presence and seeing what he has done on the ground here in the United States as an actual official carrying out deportations, but also as a newly minted activist in many ways, trying to drive that conversation. And so what we saw was this huge frenzy in the mainstream media after he spoke at the Remigration Summit. Oh, this guy's a bit of a formidable threat if he starts whipping up a frenzy here in the U.S. And the first thing he did when he came back was go speak at your rally. And so there was obviously this protest planned. The rally got more attention than it would have if it weren't for the protests and if it weren't for Bovino. But then it really became a conversation. And so tell us how the coverage was leading into the rally. Was any of it fair, or was it all just white nationalist scaremongering type stuff?
There was a lot of that, but man, we dominated the news cycle in Indiana. Anybody paying attention to Indiana news, and especially political news, it was all over for at least 2 weeks. Social media was even bigger, but like TV news, newspaper, radio, it was everywhere. I analyzed 41 pieces of media, and I identified some patterns in the rhetoric that I can get into if you want to. But I wanted to mention, like, the purpose of the event was to honor Commander Bovino and all of his service to the country, and we got to do that by having him be here first, right off the heels of his Europe speaking. And the other purpose was to kick off a national tour, which is happening. Our team has done an after-action review. We identified all the things that went well, the challenges. We're creating a template for other patriots and other states to host them. You don't need much. You need a barn in the country, and you need friends of friends. Get 100 people together. It's not that hard. And already there are multiple groups in Florida who want to do it. There's a group in Texas, a group in Kentucky, and I'm sure there are many more. I asked the audience. There was about we had hundreds of applications. We required character references. We only gave the address to 150 people, and of those, 130 showed up. I asked 130, how many of you will ask friends in other states if they will host Commander Bovino? Everybody raised their hand. So one of the big purposes of this is to start the brush fire, and that happened.
That's great. That's so encouraging, especially if he comes down here in Florida. We'll definitely get involved here at Border Hawk, and we'd love to make it out to some more of these in the future. We actually had a reporter at your event. He'll be bringing his report to us in the next few days, and I can attest that you were very careful about character referencing, because unfortunately, you tried to have what I would imagine is a bigger event, more public in the public eye, not so much a barn out in the countryside. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for you because you were sabotaged, as we've seen time and time again, by leftists, threatening the event, the hosts of the event spaces that you were trying to work with, threatening security, forcing them to pull out in many cases. And then apparently even local PD was against you. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, some of the people had no idea about the security challenges behind the scenes, and they were mad about the mud. We had tornadoes, like it was crazy. But basically, we hired an intern. He was working on this all the time. I was working on this all the time, and we had a team of like maybe 6 or 7 other guys in a group chat. We were putting a lot of man hours into this. We had one venue locked down, 300 seat auditorium, beautiful. We were going to have champagne. We're going to have, men in suits, women in their dresses. But I was like, you know what? I should get another one just in case. I locked that one up. I toured it. The woman was, in her 60s. She goes, I love what you're doing. I was a young Republican when I was in college. And I go, well, ma'am, we're a little nervous that the activists are going to make your life hell, and then you'll cancel on us. And she goes, oh, we would never do that. Let me put it in your contract. We will not cancel due to activists. I'm like, okay, cool. And she's like, I'll email it to you, sign it when you get to your office, and send it back. I went back to my office. I signed the contract, and I never heard from her again. And then the other venue that was the original venue, they go, don't worry about a formal contract. It's informal. We won't cancel. And I go, are you sure? And then a week before the event, they canceled. So we had 2 more venues. We had 4 that we went through, and ultimately we went with a 5th, which was a former Green Beret out in the country on a homestead, amazing patriot. We had 2 different security firms cancel on us, private security. We were going to spend like 10 grand on that. One ghosted us, and one said, it's too dangerous. We don't want to do this. We were sharing our information with one of the police departments. They leaked the information. So we stopped collaborating with local police, which increased danger. So it was not like, organizing a wedding is difficult and stressful enough. This was like 10 times that.
Yeah, with security concerns, obviously, and the radical left did turn out. I mean, they did. And so tell us a little bit more, because my understanding is that originally you planned to host the event in Fishers, Indiana, and because of all these issues, these loopholes that you had to jump through to actually make it happen, you actually had to host the event pretty far outside of Fishers, but that information was never made public to the radical left, and they organized the protest in Fishers. Unbeknownst to them, you were far, far away, nowhere near them. Tell us a little more about that, because I thought that was pretty humorous. I didn't know if that was intentional or not.
Oh yeah, we had like security and depth of security with like 7 maybe different security protocols just to protect our attendees. We had hundreds or thousands of threats, but 3 of them were bad enough that I passed the FBI. Um, but what was your question again?
Well, I just wanted to hear about whether or not it was intentional that you had the
Oh,
event so
yeah.
far out, because the protest was organized for in Fishers. I assume they probably thought that they were very, within spitting distance of you. When our reporters were headed there, they were like expecting them to be basically outside the venue, and it was not the case at all because you threw them off the scent.
No, we had decoys. We had all kinds of security levels. For example, one of the things is you don't just buy a ticket, you had to request a ticket. So when you requested a ticket, you had to give character references, either people in our network or people in local GOP, whatever. And there was a lot of people who faked their references. There was this one, I don't know if he's a sitting Democrat or if he's running for Democratic office. He faked a minister's reference. I got a text from a minister. He goes, "Oh, I baptized him in the pond behind my house." I was like, "Okay." I called the church. They go, "That's not the number of our minister." So this guy faked a minister's reference. And then I sent him on a wild goose chase. I gave him the wrong address. Within an hour, it was leaked. I knew it would be. And all these doofuses were running like hours away from where the real place was. That was quite fun, actually.
Oh, that's great. I have to salute you for making them work so hard and get nothing out of it. Having participated and been to a lot of events like this, whether it was AFPAC or the VDARE conference, I know how challenging these things can be and how just nasty the left can be trying to force their way in, infiltrate. We had people outside the VDARE castle taking pictures, people threatening the children of the organizers. I mean, it's just really awful stuff. So I think you did an admirable job of throwing them off the scent. Let's talk about the issue in Indiana. We see quite a few stories. A lot of them actually are on your highways, but we did cover this recent one, and when we're referring to illegal aliens, legal immigration, this one actually unfolded right near Fishers. There was an illegal alien who has been charged with raping a child in Fishers at a work site there, and so. That was interesting coincidence that I covered that literally as you guys are having this event in Fishers, and the Open Borders left is out there saying we can't deport anybody. Obviously, this is somebody that needs to be probably sent off planet, but certainly sent out of our country. How is the situation in Indiana? You've been under Republican leadership, but we get the sense that they're not all that serious about immigration issues in your state.
Well, this is a difference of opinions, even among very close friends, including my board. I think that if you're a conservative, you should totally say clearly that, our laws matter. If our laws matter, there wouldn't be tens of millions of illegals here. Now that they're here, if the laws matter, they should be deported immediately. I think that should be an absolute obvious thing for any conservative to say. But I've learned that people are not willing to say that. A lot of people aren't. So we have a lot of squishy Republicans here in Indiana. And just saying that is controversial among my inner circle. Some people say, no, 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 no. They're the best that's ever been. They're our allies. And I'm like, I don't know if they're getting death threats like I am. I don't know if they're doing all this at their own personal cost like I am. Where are they? So that's been very interesting. There's been a divide. I think this is a good thing. Are you on our side or are you a squishy Republican? That's been very helpful. It's really eye-opening that, in a place like Indiana, and I know this is true for other states, a lot of people think that the Republicans will just run the show. That's not the case. I went to the Republican convention in Fort Wayne this year. One of the guys running one of the committees, the Rules Committee, I was watching him conduct his business, and somebody beside me showed him on Facebook. His Facebook picture is him with like some gay flag. So the problem is a lot of citizens think that because Indiana is red, it'll just take care of itself. The opposite's the case.
Certainly, and we see, we're covering a lot of stories out of Utah right now. Actually, Utah and Idaho, the Mountain West, where, traditionally very red conservative states that are they're being taken over by, in many cases, they're just Republican in name only. They're just Democrats who realize they couldn't get elected if they ran as as Democrats, but if they run as Republicans as some sort of a moderate option, then in many cases they do get elected. We've seen some really disturbing comments from the Republican mayor of Provo, Utah, recently championing refugees, quote unquote, as the new modern pioneers, and you just see that in across places where you're like, if you're not paying attention to these issues and you don't realize how soft the governments are going in many of these places, then you're just shocked. You're taken aback. But this is in Utah. This is in Indiana. This can't be the case. But it is. And in many cases, as I alluded to a few minutes ago, you have these situations where a lot of the trucking disasters that we're finding out about, a lot of them are these companies that are registered in Indiana. And you would think that if the governor of Indiana and the legislature there was serious about cracking down on illegal immigration, they'd be going after these truckers and these trucking organizations, these companies that are headquartered in your state. You have a ton of them. Danielle on X has exposed like entire neighborhoods where practically every house is a trucking company. So, I mean, what do you think about? Have you kept up on the trucking issue that has been centered in your state?
Yeah, definitely. That's not my number one priority because there's so many things to pay attention to. But we actually had, who's the trucker? McGill?
Yes, Gord McGill.
Gord McGill, awesome dude. He was on Tucker. I actually reached out to him and we hosted an X space with him and one of our representatives, Representative Jeter, who knows the issue inside and out. And we had, a couple hundred people listening. It was really interesting talking about solutions that we can do in Indiana. But the thing is that our total lack of infrastructure, I just want people to understand this. In a nation of 350 million people, there might be 50 full-time advocates working to reduce immigration at FAIR, Center for Immigration Studies, and Numbers USA, and a couple others. And 90% of their budgets come from one family foundation, Colcom. And Colcom's motivation is not to preserve Christendom. The reason why they don't want mass immigration is because of environmental concerns. They don't want the population to go up because it hurts the wildlife or whatever. So we have almost an entirely non-existent infrastructure. And when people complain on Twitter, they really need to understand that that's not good enough. We need organization. One other concrete example. I was on the local news with this immigration attorney called Gresk, and he mentioned how many cases he gets a day. I looked up the average cost per case, and I realized, my God, this guy's a law firm is making $10 to $15 million a year just focusing on immigration cases in Indianapolis. I thought, wow, what if he just gave 5% of his revenue to our opponents to keep the grift going? That would be like $600,000 a year from one immigration attorney. But our organization, we've been around for about a year, we've only raised $50,000 roughly. So and we also think that there's about 100 people in Indiana full-time working to increase immigration, while our side has 0. So people need to understand that it's totally asymmetrical. There's like no organization on our side, which is why what you're doing at Border Hawk, and there are other groups, but we're all basically ragtag volunteers.
Yeah, and funny story, you didn't know this, but Border Hawk was actually born out of the same network that was funded by Colcom. Originally, we were birthed under the roof of U.S. Incorporated, which is no longer. We're out on our own now. We're our own 501c3, and we have no connection to Colcom anymore. But what you say is true. Colcom does fund the majority of the think tanks and the organizations that are doing something to combat the messaging and the propaganda on mass immigration into the U.S. And basically it's just a one-sided fight. And we actually asked Oilfield Rando, who has done incredible work at Rando Land and now at Morse Institute, has just done an amazing job uncovering the amount of money that gets poured into the different NGOs, organizations that are committed to flooding the United States with as many people from the third world as possible. And he's uncovered billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been taken from American taxpayers, funneled through the federal government and out to these organizations, which basically were funding our own demise. And I asked him, have you ever seen even a dollar go to the other side of the issue? He said, I've never come across it. That's what we're up against as well.
Something I want to throw out really quickly. There's this Harvard economist named Borjas, and he put out some research about the immigration losers and immigration winners. He says that there's about a wealth transfer of $500 billion transferred from the immigration losers to the immigration winners. The losers are American workers. The winners are the corporations and the immigrants themselves. So $500 billion a year is transferred. If you do the net present value of that cash flow, it's multiple trillions of dollars. Think about the incentives of trillions of dollars. It is like standing up and stopping Niagara Falls. I don't want to blackpill people. I just want to shake them and like slap them and pour cold water on them. We need more structure and infrastructure.
100%, 100%. Could not agree more. Well, let's close out with just your general take on the immigration situation in the United States as a whole, and how do you feel that the administration is handling things versus your expectations versus reality now that we're closing in on, almost 2 years. It's 18 months. So just where we're at near the halfway point of this administration, have they delivered in some ways? Are they delivering in ways that maybe we're not keeping an eye on, in your opinion, or where are they falling short?
I don't know. There's a million different angles to that, and I'm not a DC insider. I know what everybody else knows on Twitter. I do think it's interesting that sometimes they're not releasing the data, as I understand it. And there's an organization, I think it's Mike Howell's organization, where they're literally suing to get data on how many people are being deported. You shouldn't have to do that. It should be clear as day. So that's a red flag. The other thing is that as much as I love like the interior enforcement and like all those cool edits and stuff, we don't need like the theatrics. We just need we need more men with briefcases going after the white collar crime than we need even Commander Bovino's awesome mean green team. I don't know if you saw this video recently of Charlie Kirk talking to roofers and how basically all the roofers are committing felonies because they hire illegals. Like that needs to stop. And that's what I'm pointing at about the $500 billion transfer. So I don't know the inside. It doesn't look good. I feel like we spent so much political capital to get Trump in office. JD Vance is not a guaranteed win. What if we don't get him? What if we get Gavin Newsom? Is it game over? Curtis Yarvin seems to think so. Curtis Yarvin said something. I know people love him or hate him. He's brilliant, I think, and you need to be able to understand him, at least to disagree with him. And I agree with him on a lot of things, but he said something that made the hair on my skin stand up. He said that a predator, have you heard this? A predator in nature does not go in for the kill immediately. It circles. Imagine a cheetah going to kill a warthog. The cheetah is in the grass. You can barely even see the cheetah. It's like circling the warthog. And the warthog kind of gets startled a little bit, but it goes back to eating its grass. But the cheetah will pounce and kill. That's basically what's happened. Curtis says that we've not seen mass immigration. Mass immigration is like 100 million people. And it's his opinion that the deep state, the communists, the globalists haven't even started to attack yet. They're circling us. And if they get power again, they're going to go in for the kill. That scares the shit out of me, to be honest.
Very possible. I mean, we saw horrible scenes out of Ceuta in Spain, Morocco area in recent weeks. And of course, we've seen very similar things happening on our border. But I think that's true. We could see that every day for just years and years on end. And we did to some degree, but I think you're making a good point here that it can get so much worse. There is an unlimited supply of these people. And if the globalists really want them here en masse to make the Biden years look like child's play, I think they could probably pull that off, unfortunately. So we'll see how it all plays out. Keep fighting. We salute you for what you're doing over at Save Heritage Indiana. Let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find the organization, and how they can support.
Can I say one last thing?
Of course.
So obviously saveheritageindiana.org, but I bought the domains for all the states, Save Heritage Texas, Save Heritage Ohio. So when we have a strong foundation, we can replicate the model. The other thing I want to mention is that the reason why I started my software company, commandleaders.com, is because all this talk on Twitter, I'm like, are we going to do something? What if we converted 1% of that action? Now, I want to rewind the clock a little bit. Last summer, I took 3 months off full-time, and I tried to find at the national level who's working on this issue. That's how I discovered Cole Common numbers and so on. And I tried to get them on the phone. They were busy. I could only get one person on the phone. I was like, I'm a software engineer. How can I contribute? Couldn't find anyone who would take me up on that. And I thought, wow, for every Daniel Poynter who's willing to spend 3 months trying to find out how to contribute, there's 50,000 others who want to contribute, but they're not going to take 3 months off their work. So that's why I came up with this idea of Command. What if there's something you could do for 2 minutes a day? It's the least you could do. That would move the ball forward. And so while I did, I am scared by Curtis Yarvin's vision of how the predator could attack. And we know that the John Birch Society has been talking about this for 70 years, and it seems like the communists are winning. I don't think it's game over yet. I think we have, one of our guys can take on 1,000 of theirs. That's one source of white pill. The demographics of the American people, that's another source of white pill. And in terms of like all this talk on Twitter, the Overton window has changed so much since we started last October. And it's only been 6 or 9 months. It's already changed a lot. You can't predict where it's going to go. I think it's just going to go even further to the right. Now the question is, We need to convert that talk into action, and I think we're going to do that. But the stakes are pretty high. So follow us on Twitter at Heritage Indiana, saveheritageindiana.org, and that's it.